First question in, Bruce, from Jim up in Montana. He wants to know what a consistent obstacle is, either creatively or technically, and how we overcome that. You want to go first?
Yeah, so creatively, inertia, things at rest tend to stay at rest, things in motion tend to stay in motion. So do the work. Take a lot of photographs. Over time, you will discover your own voice through the stuff that you find that you like. You'll throw away a lot of stuff, but keep looking at the things that sort of push your buttons, and that's the direction you should go. Technically, I would say keeping up with the new technology is a creative challenge or a technical challenge, but it's not so hard. Once you understand the basics of the grammar of image making, then you can use that to have something eloquent to say. So master aperture, depth of field, shutter speed, and how it affects the emotional content of the imagery, and you're off to a very good start.
To play off of what Bruce said, you will plateau on your technical settings, and then again, playing off of Bruce, learn the vocabulary of photography, and then you can express yourself, technically speaking. Creatively, I think there's a lot of people out there that would say, oh man, I hit a creative wall, and how do I get through that? And that's definitely one of my biggest creative challenges. Is it wasn't until Bruce got here this weekend that I picked up my camera. I had been out and photographed the bison, but I haven't done any portraiture for, I don't know, a month or so. But when Bruce got here, I had the ability, when creatively, to sit Bruce down, talk about his 50-plus year career in the creative field, and then create portraits of Bruce as I posted the last couple days. And it's like getting right back on that creative bike and exercising that creative muscle.
Yeah, creative cross-training, just as athletes cross-train, look at other visual art forms and you'll find inspiration.
Great question, Jim. Thank you for asking. Jim, coming in with another question. Have we ever used storyboards or visualization for a photograph or for a theme shoot, a day of shooting, that kind of thing? Or do we just wing it? Bruce, want to take it first, or you want me to?
I'll jump in.
You got it.
So concept boards, yeah. So I spent the bulk of my career as a cinematographer, so storyboards were critical for communication with the client. Also good to keep sort of a visual notebook of what I want to accomplish during the day. So you could go through and sort of do a rip-o-matic, steal some images of things that have been done in the same genre before. Certainly some folks do that to a great degree. I try not to look at other people's work because I assume that they're coming to me for my particular style. But I think in focal lengths, so I'll do little thumbnail sketches of what I want to do, and that it reminds me that I want to be wide angle down low or a telephoto at a greater distance. So yeah, it's really helpful for me, and it's especially helpful if you get to the point where you're working with a crew.
For me, I've used both. So sometimes there are shoots that I've been on where you just wing it. That is a matter of trusting your gut and going with that, looking for light, looking for background, making those things all work together. Commercial shoots, even editorial shoots, yeah, for sure. There's many jobs where the art director or creative director will share a Dropbox folder where you guys can collaborate on the different themes that they want, even going down to textures and things like that, especially when you're talking about fashion.
Yeah, so, and taking inspiration from the moment. When I'm working on doing personal work, I'm constantly in search of a new muse, someone to work with who I can find inspiration within. That's a classic artist and muse relationship. And then the location. If I have time, I look at the location that I'm going to be shooting at before, preferably the day before, so I can see the same light and I know where to be with the camera to get the best possible imagery. I start with a background, put my subject in front of it, and then riff from there.
Great question, Jim. Thank you for asking. Okay, next question in. Favorite editing hack or trick? For me, as far as hack or trick, I think it comes down to two words. What if? Take that image into Photoshop or even into Lightroom and treat it like a blank canvas. There's no editing police out there. what I see with many beginners is they go extreme on the sliders, you know, like plus 75 saturation or plus 100 clarity or something like that. And there's no police out there stopping you from playing around, but ask yourself, what if? What if I take the clarity over 100? What does that look like? It doesn't mean you have to post it. There are many, many things that I've learned in Photoshop just by exploring, not being bound by, you know, some rigid ideology of you know, somebody's opinion on editing, but rather my own. How does it feel when I edit? Do I like the feel of that image? And then furthermore, I would say maybe a trick in editing is building all my own presets. I can easily tell you that I've spent over $1,000 in everybody else's presets. I always go back to my own. Now, the last time I spent money on presets, was a long, long time ago, but I make my own presets based on where I shoot, the time of day I shoot, the conditions that I shoot in. That saves me a ton of time. So if that fits into the hack or the edit, I would say that. How about you, Bruce?
Oh man, that's all the stuff right there. You know, if I'm really trying to find something new and creative, I'll throw darts in the dark, like Chris was alluding to. Try different things that you wouldn't normally do. When you're not on someone else's dime, then that's when you play and discover stuff. I'm not much of a volume shooter. I tend to be shooting for, you know, each individual client as an original approach. So, but within that, I want to have consistency. So experimentation is a good way to go. And then having some go-to things that you refer to as a great philosophy. So I basically agree with this guy.
Thank you for the question. Next question, Bruce. Is a full-frame camera a must-have?
Well, I would make reference to cinematography. What we call full frame, 24 by 36, is actually pretty massive and only recently adopted by the cinematographers. They basically work in what we would call APS-C or Super 35, 18 by 24, essentially. The biggest issue, I think, with working with a smaller format sensor is that you have trouble getting wide angle lenses coverage in the same way you can with full frame. With a crop sensor, a 200 millimeter lens is going to feel like more of a telephoto, but a wide angle is going to feel like more of a medium angle lens. So I think that's why I like full frame. Full frame also gives you more pixels. So if you shoot a little loose, you can crop a little bit more before you start to run out of pixels.
For me, full frame camera is a must because when it comes to editing and sending my images out for production in magazines or whatever, you have the most flexibility, of course, shooting in RAW, but having that full frame sensor there, especially when I have to shoot in low light conditions, like when we were out on the ORO and we're at camp at 3:30 in the morning, you know, and I'm shooting at ISO 10,000. I'm not really concerned about it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't concern me. Physically speaking, you know, like Bruce said, the difference between the crop sensor and a full frame is physically the full frame sensor is larger. And as a result of that, it also processes light much differently and we get better results in low light conditions.
Yep, and a smaller sensor will have more inherent depth of field than a larger sensor. The pixel sites are bigger, you gather more light on a larger sensor. And if you think about it, the phones that we shoot so much on, the sensor is smaller than your pinky fingernail. And you notice how they have almost infinite depth of field. That's a function of the size of the sensor. If you went to a medium format size sensor or a large format camera, like a 4x5, it's worlds different. Depth of field gets smaller as the sensor gets bigger.
Great question. Bruce, next question from my friend Kate. She's actually assisted me on a shoot up in Great Falls. We've done a lot of work together. She wants to know from both of our perspectives, what's the best way to work with commercial brands? Or what's the best way to start working with commercial brands?
Well, you have to reach their eyeballs. When I started, there was no electronic communication, no social media. So a portfolio, a laminated portfolio was something that you had to have, and you had to get it in front of somebody who might be on the other side of the country. So it was very difficult. And I used to use direct mail promotional pieces. Like there was a point in time where I would actually make a monthly calendar. I just have the calendar and then an image on the top of it. And I'd send an 8x10 to the art directors that I wanted to work with to make them sort of aware. I thought by putting a calendar with it that maybe it wouldn't hit the trash can immediately. And I later learned that sometimes they were pinned up to the, in the cubicle where the art director worked. But you have to get the imagery under their noses. Another fellow that I know that has been at it for as long as I have has given up completely on websites and such. And he finds that the bulk of his clients come from his Instagram.
Yeah, fair. Kate, for me, it's about, while we're still talking about physical things, I think there's still value in sending an art director a portfolio. Like if you printed out, some 8x10s, a series of 20 or something like that, and you sent them out in a portfolio, I think that would make a big impact. Now, if you're in a rural area and you don't have access to Salt Lake City or New York or something like that, physically speaking, I think it's even more important that you rely on the digital side of things. In every given magazine, there's emails for the editors, there's email for the art directors and things like that. I would start paying attention to those and get portfolios set up for the jobs that you want under your belt. Yeah. So if you're a baby photographer, let's say, I probably wouldn't send a portfolio of baby images to the Knot, a wedding portfolio, right? I wouldn't do that. So just keep that in mind, that you want to set up portfolios for the kinds of jobs that you want to get.
Exactly. Show what you want to do, not what you think they want to see. Don't mimic what they already have another photographer doing. Show them what you could do, but with a sensitivity to what they need. Need is what you're trying to fulfill.
Very good question, Kate. Thank you. Hey, great question here. Do we use, or do I use, any kind of color calibrating tool? And if so, which one? Color calibrating tools, Bruce, as we know, we can put those on our monitors and they tend to, represent accurate colors in our pictures. Want to start us out?
Yeah, well, so I was there at the transition from film to digital and to editing your images digitally. And at the time, the screens were not so good. The technology has evolved to such a point that it's not as critical. Back in the day, I joined Canon as a Canon print master, and calibrating both your monitor and your printer so that you had profiles for a printer was absolutely critical. So I had the spiders and all of that stuff when I did it. But at a certain point, I just sort of got lazy and didn't do it. And then I realized it didn't change much because the monitors, these new retina level monitors that you even find in laptops, tend to be extremely accurate. And I still have the calibrators, but I haven't dug them out of the drawer in, 10 years almost, I think. So not so necessary now.
In all my years of shooting professionally, nearly 15 years, I've never calibrated a monitor, ever. I've never calibrated a printer. The only calibration I have ever done is with the print lab. When I signed up with the lab that I use for printing, they ask that you send in, I think, 10 different images, and then they send you back 10 8x10s. And what you're doing is you're calibrating, making sure that what you see on screen is what you have on print. That's the only calibrating that I've ever done. It really wasn't even mine. But as far as screen calibration goes, no, I have probably a 12-year-old Dell 22-inch monitor, never calibrated it.
Yeah, it used to be you had to send in a CMYK version for print for a magazine. But now I just send in the files that look good to me and haven't had any pushback. So I think it's all a lot easier now. I wouldn't say it is critical. But to shoot a color scale, to shoot a gray card when you're doing custom white balances on your camera, it's still a pretty good idea. But I think both of us are pretty liberal in terms of what we consider to be accurate color. If we were shooting a sweater and it was a celadon color and it had to be that exact color for the catalog or all the sweaters get returned, now you're talking a very critical thing, or a particular logo color that gets critical. But most of the stuff, it's subjective. So
I was thinking canvas paint or something like that. Like if you're making an image of an actual paint, then I would want that calibrated without even thinking. You know, that would be something that I would do immediately, but I don't ever foresee that in my future.
I also pay attention to the lights within the room that I'm working. I try to have the lights, not daylight balanced, because that feels very cold inside. That'd be about 5,200 to 5,600 Kelvin. I tend to have about 4,000 Kelvin lights where I'm working, and I will look at a print if it's a print, and that's kind of rare for me, except for artwork. I look at it under color-controlled lighting circumstances.
Great question. What kind of paper is your favorite to print on? Now, in another question, you mentioned that you came on as a Canon print master, so I think that you're qualified to answer this question.
Well, it comes down to whether you're buying prints or if you're making prints. Canon introduced a great line of pigment-based printers, not ink, a number of years ago, and I was at a trade show doing a demonstration where I lit a subject, processed a file, and then digitally painted it all in 90 minutes. And the Canon folks saw my show. I invited them to see my show. Another one of these things where how do you get your face in front of people? You got to get in their face sometimes. They had a need at that particular time. I was creating imagery that would look good printed, and I became one of the founding print masters, later leading to me becoming an explorer of light. So I generally print. I keep a consistent size portfolio of my best images printed on, I think about 11 by 14 size paper. And I have lost digital files before, and all I have of some of my images are the prints that I made. So I believe strongly in having prints. But I would generally work on a luster paper or a luster canvas because I like the sheen of the surface. But for viewing in display situations, a matte paper can be really good. And Chris, you have recently worked with some interesting stuff.
Correct. Throughout my entire career, I have never printed my own work. I farm that out to a professional print lab. I use White House Custom Color, and I'll use either their fine art paper, which is called their smooth matte, and you pay an upcharge for that. But as a result, that color soaks in, it's deeply saturated. And when you look at it, regardless of the angle that you look at it, there is no reflection whatsoever. I've never printed anything glossy. At a bare minimum, I'll print luster. But if I want to one up it, I'll go smooth matte. It is, boy, that is a gorgeous, gorgeous fine art print.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with whether or not the prints are going to be displayed under glass or not. Museum glass is kind of a matte finish glass, so it doesn't have surface reflections. Where an image hangs in a home greatly dictates the stock, to be perfectly honest. If you have a lot of windows on the opposite side of the room, if you have glass or a very glossy paper, then it's going to obscure the image. But that said, the metallics are kind of fun for certain kinds of super flamboyant colors. So it's, again, a taste call. And I would suggest that you take a favorite image and send it to one of the labs and have them send you back answer prints in a number of different finishes. A lot of the paper companies that create papers for the pigment-based printers actually have sample packs. So you can get all of their papers in like an 8 by 10 size and print on them and see what you like. Image Prograph printers from Canon, 12 color pigment-based prints. The shortest life expectancy, as I remember on color fastness, is yellow and 400 years. So actually today's pigment jet prints will outlast the Mona Lisa.
Great question.